I heard somebody in the audience say as I was coming up, he's wearing no socks. That's true. Matching underwear. Just seeing if you're paying attention. I know what you're thinking. What are you, some kind of comedian? Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. I began my comedy career on the 1st of April in 1984, open mic night at the Comedy Store. Halfway through my 5 minutes, I heard a little voice in my head say, "You're home." My second thought was, I'm going to do this for a living. I had no idea how, nor any idea how difficult that would be. I've threatened many times to write a keynote called, "What Could You Do If You Didn't Know No Better?" Because I had no idea how hard it was. 18 months later, December of 1985, I said to my girlfriend, now my wife of 37 years, "I'm going on the road to be a stand-up comedian. Want to come along for the ride?" Figuring she'd go, "Oh, hell no." She said, "Yes." So we gave up our apartment, our jobs, put everything in storage we couldn't fit into my tiny little Dodge Colt, and we were on the road together for 2,629 nights in a row nonstop. No home, 7 years and change, and worked with an amazing array of people. Dennis Miller, Jerry Seinfeld, Adam Sandler, Kevin James, Rosie, Ellen. Opened up for musical acts, Randy Travis, Neil Sedaka, the Beach Boys, Lou Rawls. 2 nights at the Hotel Del Coronado in San Diego on New Year's Eve. You'll never find another love like mine. Nice guy. Since 2012, I made the jump from funny speaker, comedian, to simply a speaker who is funny. And I speak on suicide prevention as a workplace health and safety priority. And you may be thinking, whoa, hold on. A comedian talking about suicide prevention? How does that work? I think comedian is a good choice. I'll tell you why. Think about this. The world's first comedian was the court jester. And the court jester's job was to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless with humor. I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often locked in its grip with humor. I believe where there's humor, there's hope. Where there's laughter, there's life. That nobody truly dies laughing. And depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My mother could not reach her on the phone. She knew people of a certain age in my family began to wind down mentally. So she rushed over to my grandmother's house. And my grandmother, as was her way, had taken care of just about everything. She had written the checks for the monthly bills, addressed the envelopes, stamped them, put them on the kitchen counter. She had pinned her will to her housecoat so my mother could find it easily. Closed all the windows and doors, turned on the old gas stove, blew out the pilot light, and sat down at the dining room table and wrote her suicide note. "My dear children, I'm so sorry to leave you, but it can't be helped. All summer long I've been going downhill. Doctors have done all they could, but in spite of them, my nerves have gone completely shot. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and life is unlivable. Meet me in the glory land. Heavenly Father has forgiven me, and I know you will too. All my best love, Mother." 9 years later, my mother could not reach my great aunt on the phone. And given our family history, she got panicked. She bundled me into the car at 4 years old, and we drove over to my great aunt's apartment. Let ourselves in. Nothing out of place until we got to the kitchen. And then everything that should have been in the refrigerator is on the counter. Milk, butter, eggs, cheese. An old lock-type refrigerator. Not a magnetic strip, but a latch. So if you crawl in the refrigerator, pull the door to, there's no getting out. That's what my great aunt had done, although my mother did not realize that. So my mother, me holding onto her skirt tail, walked over to the refrigerator, opened the door, and my great aunt fell out and pinned me to the floor. We are face to face, her face frozen in that last moment of horror. My mother says, I screamed for days. And if you are already hardwired for depression and suicide, as I am, and you're that close to an actual suicide, and I don't think anybody get any closer, then the odds of you seriously considering taking your life later in life go up. And that's what happened in April of 2010. In the last recession, my speaking business had dropped off 80%, practically overnight. We lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like. Literally. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. I said that at a keynote recently, and a friend of mine who was there came rushing up. Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I said, hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed? I would tell you why I didn't pull the trigger, but that's another story. I'll tell you why I considered pulling the trigger. Given my family history, more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd, and the fact that I live with two mental illnesses. One's called major depressive disorder, depression, sort of garden variety, very common, and something called chronic suicidal ideation, which is far more rare. Chronic suicidal ideation means, for people like me, people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And when I say small, I tell the audience, look, a couple of years ago, my car broke down. I had 3 thoughts unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy new. And 3, I could just kill myself. It sounds absurd, however. The benefit of telling that story out loud, almost always, there's at least one person in my audience who has that condition. They have no idea it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and completely alone. Last month, a young woman came up after my keynote crying, so hard she could not speak. So I said, you have chronic suicidal ideation. She nodded her head. I said, you didn't know it had a name. Nod. You just thought you were some kind of freak. Nod. I said, do you have a therapist back home? Nod. Well, when you get home, set an appointment. Tell the therapist everything you learned today, and for goodness sakes, tell her you Googled it. Don't tell her you learned it from a comedian. A week later, I got an email from her, and it said, Frank, I think I was at that conference in large part simply to meet you. You have changed my life, and I cannot say that about a lot of people. People often ask me, since I have suicidal thoughts frequently, what I love to do is screw with neurotypical people. When was your last thought of suicide? When was that? What time is it? The reaction. So oftentimes they'll ask me, why don't you kill yourself? That young woman is one of the reasons. I feel like George Bailey in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown what people like her, what their lives would be like if I weren't there simply to reassure them that it's a thing, it has a name, there are lots of us, and you can survive this. And if I kill myself, in theory, I would take a lot of people just like her with me. A friend of mine said, you can't live with that? I said, no, I can't die with that. The other reason, and the main reason I don't kill myself, is my mother, the most resilient person I've ever met. She survived the suicide of her mother and discovering the body. She survived the suicide of her great aunt. She and I discovered the body. She survived the death of my father at age 40 of a heart attack, leaving her to raise 2 children as a single parent in the 1960s. She and my father met in high school. Both smart, both funny, both crazy about one another, and both gay. Did you know this? There is some science that says if both parents are gay, the offspring has a better than 50-50 chance of being gay. Well, I'm straight. Although, I must tell you, I think I'm about 1% gay. I like tasteful decorations, love Judy Garland, and have an amazing ability to accessorize. So about 1%. The trick for me is never get 99% drunk. Yes. Now, they were both smart, funny, crazy about one another, and they both wanted to start a family. So they thought, here's what we'll do. We'll get married, we'll adopt. Good plan. Problem is, there were very few infants available to adopt. So they decided, we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way, because this is decades before IVF and vitro fertilization. It was decades before even somebody thought, what if you used a turkey baster? So they had to do it the old-fashioned way. My mother, as you might imagine, had a little difficulty getting pregnant, but she did. And she carried it to term. And shortly after birth, it passed away. A year later, she got pregnant again. Carried it to term 9 months. Shortly after birth, it passed away. Where she found the courage to try a 3rd time, and I was born, and a 4th time my sister was born, I have no idea. Where do you find that kind of courage? So my feeling is this. My mother was so resilient, so brave, and worked so hard to bring me here. I have to be at least as resilient and brave and work at least as hard to stay until my appointed time. Thank you.